Hey, folks, Miguel Dorati here on the MMA Museum podcast, and we're back after a small hiatus off on a side project at a dog rescue. But I won't bother you with that now because we are in the presence of Matt Hamilton and museum podcast. We try to focus on pioneers, and Matt certainly qualifies as one in the lighter divisions. 135-pound competitor, Matt Hamilton. How are you, sir?
Man, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Man, it is good to see and catch up with a guy that I think is an unsung hero because I imagine you're not getting stopped on the streets these days.
It's amazing. Once in a blue moon, somebody around town will be like, "Man, I remember seeing you at a fight. I saw you fight once." But other than that, hell, even in my own gym, I have guys that come in and I start trying to tell them what to do, and they go, "Coach, did you ever fight before?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did a long time ago."
That's unbelievable. I wanted to save it maybe till the end, but tell people a little bit about your gym because though you're, of a previous generation, one of your guys, one of the younger guys that you came up with, Raleigh Delgado, maybe a little more memorable to UFC fans. He's gotten a few of his students in the UFC, and he was a UFC fighter as well. So why don't you talk about your gyms and the layout there, and then we'll get into your career, which started in '98.
Yeah, we Rolly was one of my students, back when he was a kid. And the truth of the matter is I was a kid too. I didn't have any business coaching anybody, but you get thrown into that role and you do the best you can. So um over the years, Rolly and I developed a good friendship, and he ended up making it to the UFC, and we went into business together. And so we own Westside MMA in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we also have a couple of other just strictly jujitsu only gyms, Westside BJJ, and they're doing great. We've got some great people that work with us, and yeah, Rolly made it to the UFC, got some pretty good notoriety. I think he I think he got screwed out of his decision when he fought. Man, I even forget the guy's name. He was the British guy. It was really big. He
Pickett?
had come off. He had come off a couple of fight of the nights. Man, I forget the guy's
Weight
name.
class did what weight class did Raleigh fight at?
Rolly was fighting at 55 in there,
Okay.
and man, yeah, for the life of me, I can't remember the guy's name. I
I'll
just
look it up for us
remember.
here while we talk.
Okay, I remember we were in the sauna cutting weight, and we're just sitting in there, and this guy comes in and sits down in front of Paul Kelly. It was Paul Kelly.
Okay.
So Paul Kelly comes in and sits down in front of us, and he takes his sauna suit off. And I remember thinking to myself, son of a bitch, this guy's big. And I didn't want to say anything to Rolly, but just as I kind of looked out of the corner of my eye, I could see he was looking at me, and we both just started laughing like, holy shit, this guy's back is 4 feet wide. But man, Rolly beat that guy, and he lost a decision. So, he wasn't in there that long. But, I think legitimately he should have been 2-1 in the UFC. And, he had a good little career. He's tough for anybody to deal with. He's so long and he's good
Mm-hmm.
at jujitsu. And
Yeah,
so yeah,
that's what I remember about him. That he was like, at the time when he was, in the hook and shoot circuit, he was 6 feet tall, 135.
yeah. That's a lot to deal with, man. That's just that height, and he's strong and gangly for somebody that size. So yeah, he just, I think he grew into some confidence later in life. If he'd have had that confidence earlier, uh, I think he'd have probably even done better. But he had a good career anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. That. I think that's a good stuff. So let's get back to you here. So I believe you wrestled. That's your start, but bring us how you go, and correct me if I'm wrong, but bring us how you go from a kid in Arkansas to a guy that's driving around looking to fight.
well, here's what's funny, Miguel. Arkansas didn't have wrestling when I was growing up. There was a guy probably, man, I forget how many years ago, maybe about 20 years ago, named Greg Hatcher here in Arkansas that actually brought wrestling to Arkansas. I got started doing taekwondo, and one of the guys that I was friends with in the taekwondo school was like, "Man, my brother wrestles, and I want you to, he's going to start doing taekwondo." And well, of course, we're in there chopping and doing all the stupid taekwondo stuff because it's the time we didn't know any better. And man, we just kind of started wrestling around because he was in there and could wrestle. And at this point, I'd already had a few amateur fights, and I don't even remember if I had fought pro yet or not. I think it was right after I had my pro debut. But prior to that, I didn't have any wrestling. And I just started wrestling with this kid, learned some, and then I started wearing that pink singlet because the way my body's built, even when I'm lean, I've got love handles. And it was literally because I was trying to hide my love handles, and everybody got scared that I was some sort of a big time wrestler. And so they were more afraid of my shots. And since I was aggressive, people just thought I wrestled.
That was a good gig, and the pink gimmick you made work for you as well. Over the years, it's funny now you get, Adesanya paints his nails and stuff, and it's a social media, viral moment, and you used to kind of do it just, try to get a little bit of attention on yourself. You know what I mean? It's a whole different world.
It's funny that I guess, I was ahead of the curve in that. And that was really nothing other than one of the girls that was in my kickboxing class came in one day, said, "Hey, coach, I'm in cosmetology school. I'll get extra credit points if you'll let me do your nails." I was like, "Okay, well, I'll come let you do my nails." She painted them, and everybody just laughed, and it was such a hoot. As a result, man, here I am 30 years later. My feet are always pedicured. They're always, my toenails are painted. It's just, it's just a habit now. But it is funny that, that was kind of the pink outfit and all that. And the only reason I did that is, man, I'm a little guy, I'm redheaded. And back then, it's hard for people to understand, but back then you couldn't even buy fight shorts. Like, I remember the first thing that I fought in, I couldn't find a pair of spandex shorts. So I got a pair of bicycle shorts. And then I realized, man, I look like everybody else. I'm in black tights and I don't look very mean. So I'm just going to go anti-hero and try and look as unassuming as possible. So yeah, that was just kind of how the pink came up. And I found a lady online, singlets.com. She made custom singlets. So I ordered some, and she gave them to me for free to kind of as a sponsorship. And that's what I wore for all except two fights, or no, three fights after that. Two because the promoters were assholes. And then my last comeback fights, I had two comeback fights, and the commissions had stepped in and it made you compete bare chested. So
I got you. Now check this out. So this is one of those anomalies that also no longer will happen, in the sport with commissions and stuff like that. But you made your debut at Super Brawl 9, and this is in September of '98. And that's that's a nice debut. That's a flight out to Hawaii. Am I correct?
Yes. So what had happened is we did that amateur national tournament thing with Extreme Challenge, and there were some of these other regional shows. I forget. You have got a much better memory and are a lot more of an encyclopedia than I am. But there was a show out of, I want to say, Amarillo, Texas, where like Evan Tanner used to fight for.
Yep. That's the USWF under. He's a blonde wrestler. He's awesome, man. He did a Steve Nelson. He's the guy who fought Ralph Grayson.
Okay, well, those guys had a show. There was Super Brawl. Well, anyway, some of those guys got together and they did this national championship thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw that time was the first time I'd ever seen a weight class. They were advertising on the old Full Contact Fighter webpage that there was going to be this tournament with all these different brackets, and they had a 135 weight class. So I was like, "Holy shit, 135!" I've never seen that as a weight class. And at the time, I was really naive, and I was like, "Nobody in the world can beat me at 135," because I was walking around about 140 pounds, and never being really out of Arkansas to train. I thought, no way anybody beats me. So
That's the attitude to have, though,
yeah, I mean, you need some of that youthful exuberance and ignorance to be a good fighter for sure. So I bought a ticket to El Paso, Texas to fight on Super Brawl with this tournament. Well, I get there and nobody else at the 135 bracket showed up. And nobody else showed up at the 150 bracket except one guy. So they were like, "Well, do you want to fight this guy at 150?" I was like, "Well, I want to fight somebody." I flew out here on my own. So I fought him and beat him in like 19 seconds. It was, he threw a big punch. I ducked under it, took his back, choked him out.
Okay, yeah, that's the Keith Berry fight. Now, so that was the opening step of you getting into these Super Bowl shows, but that was a
Correct.
pro. That's listed as a pro fight. So
It wasn't though. It was an amateur fight.
okay, so it's listed wrong because what I was going to say is they have a couple of amateur fights listed for you after your pro debut, and that's another one of those tournaments where you fought Strandberg and Curtis.
Correct. And that was where I went after. That was the 150 that I got to go up to Iowa for Monty in Extreme Challenge. That was because I won the fight in El Paso. So again, I foot my own bill to go up to Davenport, Iowa, which is a miserable drive from Arkansas,
Ooh.
and fought those two guys. And man, those were two really tough fights. And I wish I had videos on them because I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, this
But
is first. Let me give you a little backup on this, okay? It is 98. It is the kind of tournaments, and what's going on here is the amateur status of these tournaments is basically so that they can say, well, we don't pay amateurs, and they don't give you any money, maybe some gas money or something. But it alleviates a lot of negotiations and stuff on the mat. So guys are really just fighting for an opportunity. It could go either way. And for Matt that day, he wound up getting other guys similar to him, guys that were looking to, that were more serious than your average bar fighter. Let's just call it that. Jason Strandberg is not a joke. Hey, Jason Strandberg, I think, this is an amateur fight where you did get the victory, but Strandberg, when he turned pro, went 5-0 before retiring. He was an undefeated guy. He's a good guy. It's a solid fight. Talk about that one.
Strandberg was 11-0 and was the favorite to win that tournament, and I got him in the first round. And I remember I ended up, I think I choked him out, but I remember him catching me in an armbar, and I got out of it. And when I went back to the corner or went back to the dressing room, my coach was like, "Man, I was worried about that armbar." And I was like, "Why?" It was like, it wasn't even close. And he's like, "Man, it looked close to me." And I was like, "Oh, hell no, it wasn't close. Nothing." Well, when the adrenaline wore off, I was like, I mean, I went the whole way home with my arm in a sling, popping ibuprofens. I was like, holy shit, it was closer than I thought.
Yeah, no, and then now you're being a little coy because you got him in the first round, but these were 1 round, 15-minute fights. So what
Yeah.
you meant to say was you got him at around the 6-minute mark, which is, that's something no fighter does now is fight 6 straight minutes, unless one of the judges fall asleep on a smaller show. You know what I mean?
I really wish that, and I think I'm being unbiased here. I don't think this is just because this is the way we did it. I think that's a better method for fights. I wish, like now with the UFC, I wish it was a 15-minute fight and you judge it based on that 15. I don't think the 10-point must system is good for MMA.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And if you want to get talking of philosophy like that, they're always late. They were too late instituting weight classes at a higher level, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about real pioneer stuff here, and even now, it's not a perfect world. So let me let me ask you, who did you fight first, Stramberg or Justin Curtis? Jason Stramberg.
I fought Stramberg first, and I ended up getting a bye in that tournament because it was an 8-man tournament. I think somebody didn't show up, and I ended up getting a bye. But and I was afraid, like, man, that's going to taint, you know, the win because, of course, I expected to win. Well, then when I got Jason and saw that he was the guy that was the man to beat, I was like, well, good. Well, I beat him, so it's there's no asterisk on this now. And
Yeah,
that Curtis, man, he was a big guy at 150. And I
yeah.
remember that the fight was close. It was so close. And it was getting towards the end of the fight. And he got me in a guillotine and went to start kneeing me. And I caught one of his knees and did like the Kurt Hennig perfect plex and landed. And I ended up winning a split decision. And one of the judges said, "Man, the perfect plex is why you won that fight." And I was like, I know that was it. But that guy was big and strong. And, if it wasn't for that one cool move towards the end, he would
You
have
could.
probably won.
It's listed, and in those days the records could be messed up. But it's listed as a split decision. So you won
I
that one.
think it was. Yeah, it was really close. And that's the only reason I won is that I got one cool highlight reel move. And that's in my head. So it's like if I had a video, it's probably I just rolled him backwards, but it felt like a perfect plex. And a judge said that was what it was. So I'm going with that.
Take it for sure. Now let me put some context. It's 1998. The UFC is doing 4 or 5 shows a year. There's nothing like this weight class there. You hear about it in Japan. There are groups, small groups like Monty and his people were doing tournaments. Hook and Shoot in Indiana we were doing the weight classes eventually and stuff like that. And what we have is like right off the bat, a little bit of a heyday here. That Jason Stramberg is a guy that at the time was definitely a technique-oriented fighter compared to everybody else. Yourself also, you had a knockout in your first minute of the fight, and then you went 6 minutes, and then a full 15 straight minutes of fighting to win a split decision. You've gone like the whole gamut in 3 fights, and are already really among the little groups starting to get a little bit of a rep. Like, hey, this guy from Arkansas is not bad. Did you feel a little bit of that? Because the next fight you get actually the trip to Hawaii. Is that right?
Right. So everything was like, just the Rube from Arkansas until I got that quick win in Super Brawl. And then people kind of liked what they saw. And then after the winning that tournament in Iowa, you're right. I felt like, hell, you knew who I was. Monty Cox knew who I was. I mean, it's like, shit, I started feeling like, hey, man, I'm starting to be somebody. Um, back then you get that Full Contact Fighter newspaper in the mail and be like, holy cow, look, I'm in this, I'm something. I guess that was the social media of the day. And what they did at the end of, they told us in Iowa, like, whoever wins these divisions, you're going to get pro contracts. There's 2 for Super Brawl in Hawaii. There's 2 for Extremes Challenge. I think there was going to be in Indianapolis. 2 for that show down in Amarillo. So they drew names out of a hat because they knew whoever got the first picks were going to pick Hawaii.
Sure.
So of course I picked Hawaii, and
Mm-hmm.
it was such a great opportunity. I was able to pay for my mom and dad to come out to Hawaii, and man, got to go see Don Ho, and it was it was worth getting punched in the face a little bit. So
it's it's cool that that's what you remember too, because a lot of people, even with that, you weren't getting paid what you should be paid. It's not real fair compensation, but it's nice that uh, when you got a chance at it, you took care of your family. It shows
well,
a
I got for that pro debut, I fought 2 times in one night, and I got $200.
yeah. Yep.
Which, man, it's like we talked about a little bit before we went on air. It, it sounds cliche, but man, I wasn't fighting for the money. I was fighting for me. The reason I was fighting is I finally found something athletic that I was good at.
Right.
I would have much rather have been in the NFL.
Now, I was going to say, Arkansas is football country, huh?
Yeah. I grew up, I wanted to be Tony Dorsett for the Cowboys, and that just wasn't going to happen. And it made me feel like I was making my dad proud of me. It's like he had to sit through a lot of years of me warming the bench playing football. And, it's like now when all of my peers are working a regular job, I got to be like, hey, my dad gets to say his son's out fighting professionally in Hawaii, so
Yeah.
that was worth way more than any money would have been.
And it's funny, you're actually touching upon, I think, something that really is a factor from those early days, and like, for example, even in negotiations for fighters, especially guys in other weight classes and stuff, but even for yourself, it's like, oh no, I got a gig in Japan. Japan didn't pay anything either. You know what I mean? It's not like you were going over there to make, $10,000 or anything like that. They took as much advantage of people as anybody else in terms of low pay, but it really did add to the mystique. Like, to be, honest, how's a kid from Arkansas ever going to get to Tokyo? Now you wrote that.
Exactly, man. I think I got paid $1,000 to fight in Japan, and to be honest with you, I hated it. I hated every second of it.
Let's get to it. Let's get to it. Let me. We're still back in the Super Bowl days here first.
Fair enough.
So now in Super Bowl, you go to Hawaii, you get through Diana Biryani, and then in the finals, and this is a 155-pound tournament, you wind up with another guy, a pioneer and a world-class guy at this point, Ryan Bowe.
So yeah, Ryan ends up winning the tournament. I got him in the second round. So first off, it's really awesome in Hawaii because that Blaisdell Arena was packed. It was full of people. I got to fight a hometown guy in the first round, so that was cool. So I'm still at that point too in fighting where I'm still following the Hoist Gracie principles. Lay there, take an ass whooping, catch a sub.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a rougher fight, and I think Ryan got an armbar on a guy in like 5 seconds, and he was pretty fresh. So here was the scene though going into that is I was under the agreement that I was going to get one fight at 135 to go out there. And that's what I signed up for. Like a week, 2 weeks before the fight supposed to happen, it's, hey, would you be in our 155 and or 150, 155 and under tournament? It's a 4-man tournament. It's like, okay, great, whatever. We get there, it's not a 4-man tournament. It's an 8-man tournament. And dude, I've talked to Ryan since then, and I don't know what the circumstances were behind this. I loved it. He seems like a great dude, but he wasn't at the weigh-in. I don't know how much he weighed, and I'm not saying he weighed any more or any less, and it wouldn't have mattered. It didn't matter.
He was already bigger.
Yeah, he was already bigger, but at least be at the weigh-in and let me feel like you weigh 150 pounds. So we walk out there for the face-off, and I'm looking at him thinking like, holy shit, this guy's like He looks like he's about 170. And so, man, we run out there. He body locks me and just takes me down, and he's mounted on me. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm really good at the hitchhiker armbar escape. I need to give him my arm and try and get out, see if I can end up in side control if I'm going to have any shot at this. Because he was punching at me and I was defending him. I mean, I wasn't going to get out. I couldn't pass his mount. This was a Hail Mary. So I throw my arm up and he takes it. I start this hitchhiker escape. The referee grabs me and goes, "Are you okay?" And I start screaming at him, "Move, move, get out of move." And about that time, my arm starts popping. So I tap out. If it would have worked, Ryan was going to get right back on top and it was going to delay the inevitable. But I was just like, holy shit, man. That was my one Hail Mary to try to get out of that and maybe buy myself, maybe he would have, rotaried around and broke his ankle or something. But yeah, he was going to beat my ass that night no matter what. But I wanted another minute or two of it.
And that's the thing, you got a minute. And for a competitor like yourself, that does stick in your craw a little bit, like the first loss, and you didn't even get to show your thing, and especially on a big stage. Like, I'm looking at the roster, like, that was the legendary day that Jatara Nakao choked out Pat Miletich in the main event.
Dude, that was the first time I had ever seen somebody do some serious weight cutting. And with my own eyes, man, I watched Pat make that weight and put on, I think, like 20 pounds in the matter of like an hour. It was just, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. The Miletich was one of the first that got that scientific approach that let you really reach those big numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you remember Eve Edwards?
Yes.
He was he wasn't a huge weight cutter, but really precise. And I remember he made his weight, walked off, went over there, drank a little Pedialyte, and started eating an apple. And I asked him, I said, "Come here, get back on the scale. I just want to see." And just with the act of a Pedialyte and that, he was at 162.
Jesus Christ.
And so I can't physically explain it other than Miletich, Eve, you're onto like high level athletes. Like their body, doesn't turn things to fat like mine does.
Well, man, I remember not, being in Arkansas, I had no idea about what weight cutting was. When I was at a weight, that's what I weighed. I mean, I remember Rolly and I fighting in a tournament, and we were both going to fight at 135. And of course, I'm sure we're going to get there because it's later on in the timeline. But man, we both weighed 135 pounds. I mean, there was no cutting weight. That's what we weighed.
Yeah, so, a lot of guys came with pieces, but not the whole package. You know what I mean? And
what I ended up doing is, I don't know if you remember the old fighter Anthony Hamlet.
Sure, he was a killer weight cutter.
He was a killer weight cutter, and man, I just asked him at a fight show one time, "Hey, man, how do you do that? What's the deal?" And he kind of told me what he did, and it was a kind of a template from there on out.
Yeah, I remember him cutting weight, and me as when I had my promoter hat on, I could be a bit of a jerk at times, and he was the real soldier. Like he went with me to like an Applebee's and watched me eat while he's cutting weight, and I was being a jerk about it too, And I remember, and then when he finished the weight cut, a lot of people have different ways of rehydrating, and I think all he was doing was lemons and salt, and that's how he was rehydrating. Putting stuff, electrolytes, really basically the salt or electrolytes, putting everything back into his body. And then he had a meal and stuff like that. But that's how he started off. And that was the first time, joking around, but I was watching it. That was the first time I saw a real scientific approach with Anthony Hamlet from Matt Humes. Yep. You'd eventually fight his teammate, Ryan Diaz, but we ain't there yet either. Now, you get back, you've been to Super Bowl, you lost the tournament at the end of the day, even bowl. Well, let me ask you, did you make any connections over there, like with Shudo and things like that? Because we mentioned the cow, and, Bo had a lot of Shudo associations over there. Or did you feel like your performance wasn't enough to impress it?
Man, it was honestly, Miguel, the last thing on my mind. I was just happy to get out in front. I mean, man, there were like 19,000 people. That Blaisdell Arena was packed, and to get out there and get booed by all those people and then beat the hometown guy, dude, that was worth everything to me. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And then to get to hang out with my parents, my dad had only been to Hawaii when he was on his way to Vietnam. Man, they went to a luau. We went and saw Don Ho. I mean, dude, I had such a great time. Any more fighting was not even on the tape, not on my mind.
Now, I'm sure that
And if you
most.
don't mind, I'm going to try to get a little. I've been dieting, trying to get this belly off. I'm starving.
Go, brother. Oh, it's all good here. I was going to mention that probably my audience actually remembers Don Ho, but if there's any youngins out there, Don Ho is like a Hawaiian type of like legend that it was a show that everybody had to go see, and the acoustic guitar and the girls with the grass dresses and stuff. So on the beach, the whole thing. It's really sends back the nostalgia pill. You know what I mean? So definitely cool.
I've got a picture of me and Don Ho when I've got both my eyes are black.
That's impressive. That's definitely impressive. So Super Bowl leaves you with a little bit of a reputation. It's still good showing, and it's definitely a full contact fighter show. Now it's definitely something that people are paying attention to. The news is covering it, but you caught a little bit of a losing streak. You entered the danger zone, which was Dan Severn's show, and that's is Fort Smith, Arkansas, also.
Yeah, man. So first off, they screwed up my ring music. I should have known that was gonna be it. So I was fighting a kid, Jonathan Border, and Jonathan had a really good record. Jonathan was kind of like me. He was the me from Memphis. We were about 2 hours apart. He's the little guy that's really good. I'm in Little Rock. I'm the little guy that's good. We were going to butt heads sooner or later. And we had this fight, and it was one of the long rounds. I think it was a 10-minute round and then a 5-minute second round.
Well, it lists as a 12-21 round match, so I don't know if that
Okay,
was.
well, maybe it was a 15-minute round then.
Yeah, no stops.
Um,
12 minutes of straight fighting.
So the first part of the fight, as I recall, Jonathan got on top of me and was pretty much on top of me, hitting me. The second part of the fight, about the halfway point, we end up switching positions and I kind of take control of the fight. At some point, there is a break in us, and I'm feeling like, man, I've got it. This is my fight now. I've turned the tide. I'm ready to put him away. And I went for a slam. I went to slam him, and I put one of my hands between his legs to like pick him up and like body slam him. And he grabbed a guillotine, closed his guard, and had me in a guillotine with my arms between his legs. I couldn't defend. And I was like, well, son of a bitch, and he got me.
Slick move, though. Slick move for sure.
Yeah, man. It was good for him. But it was a good fight. It was a really good fight. And he's a phenomenal competitor, a good guy.
Now, again, the podcast is called the MMA Museum because we are trying to give a fair documentation of what really went on back in the old days. You know what I mean? So, you check out Matt here and you're thinking, those are the old days and stuff. Now, check this out. When Jack Dempsey came up in boxing in the 1910s, 15, he won the belt, whatever. he was a legend. He was the first $1 million, gate and that sort of stuff. But he respected the generation before him. And there was another guy, Jack Dempsey. His very name comes from a first guy that was Jack Dempsey. They called him the Unparalleled. And guys like Ad Walgas. I believe Ad Walgas was the last guy who fought a 45-round world championship fight. 45 rounds. They went down to 25 in Dempsey's era. So even a legend like Jack Dempsey would have looked at those guys like the old school guys. Now, we've talked about a handful of match fights. He fought one time 15 straight minutes, another time 6 straight minutes, another time 7.5 straight minutes, another time 12, 20 straight minutes, no breaks. And those are all well over the time limits that we even have to deal with now. This is unprecedented. A guy who's done something that nobody's ever going to do again. It's as simple as that, and at a high level of competition for the time and everything like that. I believe that weight class and the guys that we've been talking about definitely were the most technical fighters on the scene at that point. There were good fighters here and there and stuff, but as a quantity, these guys, even the guys we've been talking about here, Ryan Bowe, Stramberg, high level guys, Brookins, fantastic stuff. So, be respectful. Don't be silly out there. Now, what's his reality combat fighting?
So, man, that's a fight down in I was way down in the bottom of Louisiana, and I took a fight down there. There's Rich Clementi fought down there. Some other guys, Pete Spratt, some of those guys were fighting down there.
Sam Holder.
So I got on there. I fight a guy, and man, I think his record's like 0-11. I go out there the first 20 seconds. I pick this kid up, gorilla slam him. I'm in like full Matt Hughes mode. So I'm late, I slam him, but then I'm like, I'm not doing anything. So the fight goes on and it drags on, and I'm really just laying and praying, to be honest with you. For some reason, I'm just not doing anything. I'm like in full wrestler mode, just like hold this guy down, maul him. It was a really bad performance. Well, we go to overtime, and I know he's going to try to get a takedown because I was, doing great on my feet with him. Man, he looked his head down. My hands dropped to defend the shot. He throws an overhand Hail Mary, and Jesus answered. He knocked me slap out. And, man, I woke up in the back, and that was that.
Okay. And now, I think by now the people at the podcast have gotten to know you a little bit. One of the things that stands out is the competitive nature. You're doing this not for the money. You're fighting good guys. It doesn't seem to, that's not the issue and stuff like that. So how does, falling into a 3-fight losing streak sit with you, especially because you were a guy with a positive attitude or confidence,
Yeah, man. It's weird to go from, thinking that nobody under about 180 pounds can touch me to now, losing to Ryan wasn't a big deal. It really wasn't. I was mad about the referee, but that being said, I didn't think, I was going to win that fight. So it didn't bother me. When I lost to Jonathan, I was like, man, it's kind of local bragging rights. It was a good fight. Shit, I lost it. It was a bitter pill. Whatever. I knew he was good. Everybody watches that fight, goes, yeah, those guys are equally matched. And, I could deal with that. Getting knocked out broke me. It ruined me because for a couple of years after that, my fights, it's obvious that I was afraid of standing up and engaging with people because I didn't have a coach that could get me through the mental aspects of, hey, champ, we got knocked out. We're not all of a sudden made of glass. you're going to be fine. But I went from a guy who was pretty confident about my stand up to, man, I was afraid of engaging. I was like, oh shit, anytime I get hit now, I'm going to get knocked out. It, it definitely wreaked havoc on me for a while.
Now I'm going to ask you a question here because I'm looking at the Sure Dog listing, and maybe it's wrong. We've already caught a couple little errors, right? But did you never fight in Indiana for us?
No, I did I judged up there for you guys one time. It's
Okay.
funny. I got attacked at a bar up there when I
That's
judged.
that's why I remember that's what I wanted to ask you about. Like on the side was I remember an incident where I guess you were there with Raleigh then, but I
No,
swear
I
to
was
God,
there
I
with
thought you
another
fought
guy,
in Indiana.
but that I was up there for that, and then I also went up there for an Abu Dhabi qualifier.
Okay.
And but yeah, I never got to fight up there for you guys.
Okay. Now we're gonna get down to it because you did get some travel time with us when we got the show on the road. So we'll get to that here as well. But first, there's a stop, and I think this, in retrospect, is very good redemption for a 3-fight losing streak because it looks like you have a 4-man tournament under Dan Severn's organization somewhere where you were 0-1 already. So you want to go in there for a little redemption kind of thing. And you beat Ichaku Murata and Jeremy Bolt, two guys that I think were guys that elevated the total talent pool of this weight class. Very, very, very good guys.
Absolutely, man. Murata at that time was pretty feared. He had just broke somebody's arm at a grappling tournament, and he was pretty feared. And of course, Jeremy was Jeremy. I mean, everybody knew he could fight.
Yeah.
So, and I was lucky enough to get to fight both of them, both of the guys who were probably considered the two guys to beat. I'm glad I got to fight them and not got a different path to that. And I've got to say that night I was on that night.
Now Murata is now there's rounds, but it looks like in typical early fight they decided to do 6-minute rounds. So you did 2 6-minute rounds and won a decision, and then fought Bolt, or what was the order of this?
Yeah, I fought Murata. Of course, I just smacked him on the feet. He didn't really have any stand up. He's a phenomenally aggressive grappler. But man, he just basically the fight consisted of him going for legs and me just hitting him, and so I had went out and spent a week training with Go-Kart on leg locks. So I was pretty comfortable, like, hey, I'm not going to get leg locked. So I just pretty much stayed safe and punched him and elbowed him, and that was that.
And that's one of the things, just to give credit where credit is due too. Again, it's a terrific bounce back for you, but it is 135, and I believe Murata. I'm not sure where you stand on this, but I believe Murata would have probably been comfortable at 125. With the true weight classes as they are now, but it didn't quite stretch that far. There was very little action for him at 125. There were a few guys like that in this weight class. Travis Flippin's another guy that had a fight at 135 that were you had to feel being big in this fight, because that has to feel pretty good too, because it's rare.
Well, it was funny. I was actually a little bit taller than Murata, and I was a little bit taller than Jeremy. I mean, of course, Jeremy looks like a little pocket Superman, but hell's bells, it was weird to be taller.
That's funny. That's
funny.
And
I mean, I'm a towering 5'6", so it's like
exactly.
maybe 5'5". So,
so let me ask you though, this danger zone thing. You win a tournament. What was the accolades and prize for that? Like, did you get a belt?
Man, I got a really nice belt. It was actually made by the people that made the WWE belts.
Oh, cool! You still have it?
I do. It's in a trophy case at my gym. It's a beautiful belt.
Okay, I need you to send me video of it. We'll stick it in here for the people.
Okay.
That's cool. That's cool. And that's good for Dan because sometimes Dan hasn't always delivered on people. So you had no problems there.
No, man. Dan was great. I've actually got Dan actually ended up coming through Little Rock and was at my wedding reception. I mean,
Cool.
they treated me good. The only thing that, and it's not treated me bad, but when I fought Travis Fippen, the airline tickets were cheaper from Memphis. So Rolly and I both fought on that card. We had to take our own gas money to go to Memphis to get on the plane to go to North Dakota. So, it's like that was kind of shitty, but
Yeah,
it's,
especially after having some history with the company. But okay, we'll
yeah.
get there. But the belt is good. The Bolt and Murata, like we stated, are both guys that are rated, among the people that are looking at this. And now we're in 2001, by the way. So a couple of years, these guys have all been fighting with each other, and you're starting to have a pecking order here. Bolt and Murata near the top. You get the call, Shudo in Japan. You said you made $1,000 for it, and you didn't have a great experience. But talk about it. You fought Kazuya Abe. I think he's the younger brother of Hiroyuki Abe, and one of the Shudo guys, so to speak. What was your experience like there?
So my experience in Japan sucked. I hated every minute of it. Started out, of course, this is, very limited internet at this point. They call me, ask me to fight. I'm like, yes, I'm all on it. They send me video of Abe, and they send me these two knockouts this guy has, makes him look like Mike Tyson. Well, come to find out, the dude's a grappler. He doesn't even punch. He just got lucky and knocked some guys out. So I'm training for a puncher, not doing any grappling. It is what it is. So I'm supposed to fly out on like Tuesday to fight on Saturday.
And how's that go? Little Rock to Chicago to Tokyo, or where'd they bounce you to?
Little Rock, Minneapolis, Tokyo.
Okay, that's not bad. And that's not. They could do worse.
So, well, they did.
Okay.
So we're 2 weeks out, and they tell me, hey, your plane, that flight got canceled. We're going to fly you out on Thursday.
Okay.
So now I'm flying 24 hours Thursday, make weight Friday, fight Saturday.
Yeah.
And so I get there, I get into Japan. The lady meets me at the airport. They take me to this hotel and just drop me off. There ain't, if you've never been to Japan, nothing's in English. It's not like any other country where you can get by. You just have to look at pictures and hope for the best. And they told me they were going to take me to go cut weight. Okay, great. They take me to this little gym that's about the size of my living room. It's got mats and a refrigerator in it, and a sink. I'm like, well, where's a sauna? There's nothing. And I'm not a big weight cutter, but I need to sweat a few pounds off. Well, then on top of that, I find out I'm used to fighting at 135. Well, I'm not fighting at 135.
138.
They're converting it to kilograms, so I got to go down to 132. 3 more pounds is a big deal.
Especially for littler guys. Yeah, for sure.
For a littler guy with no sauna. So I'm in the bathroom of the hotel trying to makeshift a sauna. And it was miserable. So now we get to fight time. My body clock says it's 4 a.m. I remember my corner man asked me, man, are you ready to go? And I looked him right in the eye and said, I just want to go to bed and go home. I didn't even care if I was broken. So I'm warming up, and this Japanese guy comes back to him and he goes, wear costume. I said, what are you talking about? He said, wear your costume. Because I was in my singlet.
Mm-hmm.
I said, man, you called me to, I was like, I don't have anything else. I've got, I've got jeans and this. He's like, well, you know, wear costume. And that was all he would say to me. And I said, man, I don't have anything else. So they took this guy who was laying over there on the side. He'd been knocked out. They pulled his sweaty ass shorts off and made me put those on. So, so dude, I go out there and man, I clinch up with the guy because I'm thinking he's fixing to come out throwing these Mike Tyson haymakers. He trips me. I fall down. Nothing's really happened. There's like a minute left in the round. If my brain is halfway working, I just hold on, get up, refocus, come back out for round two. I go into full panic mode, like there's like the world is ending, and get armbarred. And it was just like I wasn't mad. I just wanted to go home. And it was just I was so sleepy. It was just miserable. I hated it. And they never invited me back, and I wouldn't have went if they did.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that sentiment. There are a few things there. You can't do that trip and fight. Weigh in and then fight on basically 24 hours at that point. That's really a lot to ask of anybody, especially the first time person's on that trip and stuff. If you've been over there before, had a decent experience, and then ran into that, you might have some tools, to work it out. Hey, I know I could get rice balls at the store, if I need to eat or something. Whatever. It's I've seen it go. Some people go and they feel like the tourist buzz, and they love
Right.
it. It's like, oh, I went to where they have samurai swords, and I went to the old shrines and stuff, and they have a great experience. And then for other people, it goes wrong. I remember Phil Johns was like, man, he wound up eating at McDonald's because he just couldn't eat the food.
Man, you walk into, there was just nothing for me there. They dropped me off. I went to a subway, went underground, popped up next to the hotel. I don't know where the hell I was at,
Yeah.
and you're trying to eat based on just like what you can see. And I'm not a sushi guy, and I don't
Yeah.
think it's really good to be eating seafood, at a fight time anyway. But it was awful, Miguel. I just hate it. I just wanted to come home.
Yeah, that's a shame. Like, I with the competition, when it goes right, I think it could have been up your alley. Like, you could have fun too with good competition stuff. But yeah, if they put a damper on that, it sucks, man. Because a lot of people, I'm sure you hear it in other interviews, a lot of people put a lot of credo in that. Like, I got to fight in Japan. That was all, you know what I mean? And that
Oh,
wasn't.
it's a highlight. It's a highlight of the career, and it's something good to say. You get to fight in the home of the samurais, but hey, got to do it. Glad I did. Done.
Yeah, checked off the bucket list. Now the next fight is in Florida for the hook and shoot group. So at some point during your Indiana trips, I wanted to ask you. Now you said you did the Abu Dhabi trials. Talk about the Abu Dhabi trials for yourself. I know that's a 145-pound weight class, so you would have been
Right.
small going in there, and you know I don't remember who was in there that year, but we kept a pretty high talent level in that weight class. So you
Yeah.
probably got some good guys.
So the year before that, I actually got to go to Abu Dhabi. I sent my application in. Didn't think anything of it. Months passed. I sent an email to Guy,
Okay.
and he sends me a thing back, says you're the second alternate. And I'm just thinking, sure I am. Everybody that asks is probably the second alternate. So, whatever. Again, don't think anything of it. I get a call like 2 weeks
Wait,
out.
which year was this?
2000, I think.
Cool. Okay. So this is actually Abu Dhabi in Abu Dhabi. So this is, again, another
Correct.
pioneer step here. So keep talking.
Yeah, correct. So I get a call. They say, "Hey, man, one of the guys is out, the other guy's having visa problems. You might be in. Are you good to go? Are you training? I was like, hell yeah, I'm trying. Of course I wasn't training. And it was 146, 145. I was like 2 pounds overweight. So it's like, yeah, great. We'll go. So they send me airline tickets. And so now I'm going to Abu Dhabi on a week's notice. I go out there, I get the Japanese combat wrestling champ, and it was a weird thing. Miguel, I'm gonna plug in my phone. It's about to die on me.
Take your time.
I get this guy, and first off, this is any grappling matches that I had done prior to this. I was so much better than the other person that I was just getting them done. Like I'd never had a very long grappling match. They were over really fast. So I'm trying to find the light here. They were over really fast. So it was like I didn't have any experience with the moving around and collar ties and all that stuff. I was working under the MMA kind of time clock. I'm getting bored. I've got to do something. Well, we were tied up. One of the guys that had been training with us had just learned a baseball bat choke with the gi. And for some reason, when I'm in a collar tie with this guy, it goes through my mind, just grab your hands together and do this baseball bat choke with no gi on. And dude, I just dropped to my back and tried a baseball bat. It was the most bonehead, stupid thing to do. And yeah, I just ended up on the bottom. He went for an arm bar. I got out of it, but my arm popped. And then he went right back for it again, and it was shot at that point. So I was just like, well, yeah. So there I am with my arm in a sling in the Middle East, and it was a great experience, but it was yeah, it was tough.
Yeah, you fought Jiro Wakabayashi. So
Yeah.
seriously, one of the Shudo guys is not a joke. And I know
Well,
from back, from back in the day, they also took that appearance very seriously too.
Yeah, well, what I was hoping was the way that my mind was working out was I was like, if I get to beat this guy in the next round, I get Hoyler Gracie. Now, Hoyler's definitely going to beat me, but man, it would have been cool to say I got to grapple Hoyler.
Yeah, now, did you see Hamlet do it? Did Hamlet get was that show?
Man, this was the show that I think kind of the breakout guy that people weren't expecting to do well or weren't looking for. The dark horse guy was Joey Gilbert.
Yeah. He came in third.
Yeah, he had a really good performance. And I think in the next round, I think Hoyler beat the guy that beat me like 24-0. And yeah. I was telling everybody, I was like, look, man, Hoyler wouldn't have scored that many points on me because he would have subbed my ass before then. There's no way. There's no way I could have made it for 24 points. No way.
But, again, looking back at history, and I apologize. I thought I was prepared for this, and I did forget that you had gotten the call for Abu Dhabi 2000. I was there, and, we also met there. And then shortly after that, I think you appeared down in the Florida shows, too. So just reinforce that you were still active, still out there trying to, perform at the highest level of the sport. What did you see there at Abu Dhabi, too, in terms of, like, real technique and
man, I saw some guys doing some stuff with it seems so silly to say this now because people are going to hear it and go, yeah, no shit. But there were actually I think Mike Van Arnsdale and some of the other wrestlers were actually talking about like sprawling and dropping a hip and not just sprawling straight down. And it was like stuff that seems so basic now.
Yeah.
We were like, I was like, well, hell's bells, that makes sense. Good. Wow. Okay. And I bring that back to Arkansas, and you think I'm, some sort of wrestling god. So
Yeah, no, and I think it was absolutely that at the time. It's like you look up and there's Mark Curtin having that conversation with Mike Van Arsdale. So it's not like
correct.
you know what I
I
mean. It's
actually,
not.
I actually ate lunch with Mark Kerr. He was a really, really nice guy, man.
Yeah, yeah. He had his run there, was making a lot of money, so you had reason to be nice that
Yeah.
show. But yeah, it was definitely an amazing experience to be there. I remember, one of the things I remember Van Arsdale. Like, how do you work out, man? Do you work out to exhaustion 100% every time? He's like, nope, I go 80%. And then I asked Kurt's like, nope, to exhaustion 100% every time. It's like
Yeah.
two different theories. It's like, well, how do you argue, athletically? It's like, hey, it's amazing, just amazing little things.
Yeah. And I wish I would have been a little more. I am at the same time kind of extroverted and introverted. So like I wish I would have talked to more people when I was in places like that.
Yeah,
I
roll
really
with them.
did.
Go to the gym. It's like
Yeah,
a lost opportunity for a lot of people, I think.
man, I just kind of kept to myself, and it's like I try to tell some of my younger guys now, like, you got to be all business if you want to win and you want to be successful. But man, I look back in like the Hawaii trip, I got to go do things with my parents, enjoy Hawaii, and I had more fun. I have more memories. Like Japan, I just sat in a hotel room and did nothing, and I hated it. And I wish I would have enjoyed the experience a little bit more.
Yeah. Now, in Abu Dhabi, things were in the very beginning stages there in 2000. So for the next time, they asked you to do a qualifier. And like I mentioned, the qualifiers were pretty high rated. So who were you
Correct.
in the qualifiers?
So I got the qualifier winner, Mike Cardosa. I think he placed that year. I got Mike in the first round of the qualifier. I didn't. I should have tried to take Mike down and played from the top, but I ended up pulling guard, and it was funny. Mike ended up beating me 2-0, and just the competitive part of me looked at his scores with everybody else. I had the closest match with him, but we were grappling pretty rough. He's a rough grappler, which is fine. I am too. And I remember him whacking me, and I kind of slapped him. We both kind of looked at each other like, oh, are we going to do this? And then we just kind of smiled like, okay, yeah, we're not going to do this. But, it was a good experience. The reality of it is that's about the level of sport grappler I am. Mike won it. He did well in ADCC. He's better than me at sport grappling. I'm glad I got to go to Abu Dhabi, but it would be pretty ridiculous to be like, oh yeah, I'm one of the best 16 grapplers in the world. I'm not, but at my time in that day, I was okay. I was pretty good.
Yeah, and again, Cardozo, I'm talking about respect for the guys under 150 pounds from back in the old days, because they were maintaining a super high level of the sport. And Cardozo is definitely a guy who contributed to that. You know what I mean? Because he was at a Dean Thomas school in Florida, Paul Rodriguez and him and Dean, that was who ran together. And, on top of being a good fighter, he was also like a good teammate and like a good guy to have in your corner and stuff. And like I remember him looking to give advice to Rodriguez, who was really a quiet guy and stuff, and like taking him under his wing. All around good guy. My hat's off to Cardozo. I didn't have him in my research, brother, so I appreciate you putting that out there again.
Hey, we are a museum, old
That's
and
it.
dusty.
It's sad, right? So now you head down to Florida. This is Hook and Shoot. This is the first Hook and Shoot in Florida when we're sponsored by the ATT guys and things like that. And you face Mark Ashton. Ashton being one of the students, I believe, of Matt Hume.
Yeah. So we go down there, and when we go to the press conference, I see those big, gigantic trophies. And man, as soon as I saw that trophy, I was like, I'm not losing. I want that trophy. It was huge. It was like you won the Orange Bowl or something like that. It was just a monstrous thing. And I was like, I refuse to lose. That one's going with me. So it was fun.
So, but let me ask you though, you got that trophy in that trophy case?
I do. And the belt is actually wrapped around the trophy.
All right. So yeah, you're gonna owe me some pictures in the video and stuff. But that's cool
Absolutely.
because my hat's off to it was the first show that would become AFC, which was I was the matchmaker for like 15 or 16 of these shows, and I think they stopped doing them after about 20 shows because they decided to focus on the ATT gym and not do a show anymore. But for the very first one, the sponsor put out, they came up with trophies, Japanese style. Matt Hume fought his last MMA fight on that card. I believe Wes Sims fought Conan. This was a card that was who
It was a big deal.
Ann Riley fought a Brazilian kid. We had people from Finland and stuff that were on this team. John Fitch fought.
John Fitch had his MMA debut that night, I think.
Yep. So just a standout show that was historic. I'm glad you were there for that too, bro, because yet another sign that you had cut your teeth. You were a recognized 135 pounder. I know it doesn't amount to much, but there's respect in it because, like I said, in terms of technical fighting and stuff like that, you guys were at the forefront.
Well, dude, it was a pretty incredible thing to be, in the same dressing room with Mark Coleman. It was like that was awesome.
Yeah. Now let me ask you. You had mentioned earlier that you spent the week with Gokor. What was that like? Because Gokor is one of those mystical figures. And so, how'd you hook up with him? What was your week there like? Were you there with Caro and those guys, or what era of Gokor guys were you with?
Well, so I at the time I was going to get ready for those fights out in Hawaii, and there was a guy that was apparently like really good at leg locks. And man, I just got online and saw that Gokar is supposed to be the best guy with leg locks. And so I arranged to go out there and spend a few days. And man, I'm going to be honest with you. I think Caro or one, maybe, what's the other guy that he had, the smaller guy?
Manville Gambari.
Yeah, Manville. I think it was Manville because you got to understand, I'm about 10 years older than those guys. Okay, so yeah. I think I did some rounds with Manville, and I think he was a kid then.
Yeah.
But it may not have been him. But I remember thinking, man, and that's at the time, because like I say, he was a kid. I'm like, I got to take it easy on this guy. He's a kid, but he's aggressive. And, it's kind of, you get to that point where it's like, well, if I'm going to do too much, I'm going to have to do everything. It's like, I'm going to have to hurt this kid if I'm not just chilling. Mm-hmm. So it was, it was hard training, but good training. Gokar was very nice. I was paying him well for privates. But he never watched the clock. Like, hey, we're going to do an hour. He might be there an hour and a half. There was one guy. Wasn't it like, didn't he have a big guy named like Harud or something like that?
Yeah. Harud.
So, man.
Well, his last name will escape me.
I'm not going to swear that it was him, but I think it was. We did some rounds, and this big guy was like 200 pounds. he just beat my ass. Like it's like it was one of those things where it's like you don't have to beat up. You like if you're grappling with a guy that you're 70, 80 pounds heavier than, you don't need to just throw them down and forearm them in the throat until they can't breathe. It's like,
Yeah.
but they, that's just kind of the way they train. Like, I mean, they were training hard, but all my experience with Gokar was really nice. He was super nice, very helpful to me. I remember just like him demonstrating, like, man, dude, my calves and shins were all bruised up. He wasn't being an asshole. But he just, man, he had that old man squeeze, and it helped me out quite a bit, So I never really worried about leg locks and stuff like that. So it was it was very good. I got nothing but nice things to say about him.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, after Ashton, now this is you. I think we mentioned it somewhere. This is up in Seattle, and you take off there to fight in another hook and shoot variant under Matt Hume's uh, promotion, and this time you get Ryan Diaz, one of his students, and Ryan is now, I think, living in Vegas and kind of, one of a trainer of the stars in Vegas kind of thing. He's like a really highly regarded trainer at this time. What are your thoughts and memories of that fight?
Man, very negative on that fight. I went up there. Seattle was beautiful. And man, this may just sound like sour grapes, but it just is the truth. At that time, man, Matt Hume was like, to me, the kind of the archetype of what I looked up to. Like, I was a big Matt Hume fan, and I was happy to meet him, just like all this stuff. And he was an asshole to me, and it just like it like stuck in my gut because like I really liked him. I liked his game. I just, and so he comes back there shortly before I'm getting ready to go out and says, "This isn't a show. People don't fight in costumes and outfits." Because I had my pink singlet on. I was getting ready to go out and fight in the pink singlet. And I was like, man, Dennis Alexio fights in a grass skirt, man.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what difference does it make? Well, as usual, they went and got a pair of shorts. Matt Hume just wouldn't let me fight in the pink singlet. There was no rule. He just didn't want me to.
Yeah.
And so I think that was probably his way of getting in my head before I fought one of his guys. So I got out there and I was pretty hot. So right off the bat, I shoot and man, Ryan squirms onto my back. So he's on my back the whole round. About 20 seconds before the round's over, I reverse it, hit him a few times, so I've got some momentum. Well, remember back when I told you that the ref from Hawaii pissed me off about grabbing hold of me? Well, this guy's reffing that night. And man, the reality of it is every time we were in a bad position, if I was on top, he would stand us up. If Ryan was on top, he would move the ropes out of the way and let us stay there. I've got the thing on tape. There was one time he stood us up after it was like 15 seconds on the ground. He stood us up. It's like and it was getting to the point where I was like, this guy's not going to let me win. Because every time it was a good fight. I mean, man, they were allowing kicks to the head on the ground. So Ryan would go for a leg lock. I'd kick him in the face. I mean, it was a good fight. And I think I was going for a takedown in like the third round, and he kneed me in the face as I was going in. I got the takedown, but my eyes started swelling up, like the Elephant Man. And the ref ended up stopping it, or the doctor stopped it before the fifth round. And I who knows? I don't know what that decision would have been. Uh, It it was a very entertaining fight. I've got it on VHS somewhere, but but the referee, I don't even know what that guy's name is, but man, I'd still like to kick him in the ass, man.
Yeah, that's in Seattle, so you get to fly home and think about the loss. That was there any problem flying home with a swollen eye like that? Because I had a guy get knocked out there, and they wouldn't let him fly home for a couple of days.
No, I mean it was just having to kind of, it was pretty swollen, so I would have to like pull it open to read and stuff like that. And I remember getting home and at that point I'm still kind of a young man, and when you're fighting for a few $100 and trying to work as a bum at the karate school, I was still living with my parents. So I remember getting home late at night and kind of going in there, and my mom's like, "Hey, you want me to get up and cook you something?" I'm like, "Mom, stay in bed, keep the lights off. I don't look good, but I'm fine. Just
Yeah.
you know how moms are."
Yeah, for sure. Now, I'm having so much fun in this interview because we're going through, real good old times for me. That we forgot to tell the Indiana bar story. So you were in Indiana hanging out, and you went to like there was like a roadhouse or like a that type of bar burger place, and I think there was an incident there. Why don't you describe it from your end?
So I went up there to judge. That was when they did that all women's card,
Okay.
and I was one of the judges. And so there was that little hangout that everybody used to go to after the fights. And since I was judging, man, I didn't have to get dressed or get a shower or anything like that. So me and the guy that I was with, we went to just go kind of hold tables and wait on everybody. Well, man, there were some college age kids there, and obviously they've been drinking, and I was standing in line, and I was wearing an old I don't know, it may have been like a Joe Louis kickboxing t-shirt or something.
Okay.
And the guy starts kind of picking on me about being a karate dork or something, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And the guy that I'm with this old guy that trained with us. He was a old Vietnam vet. And so I'm trying to just blow this guy off because I'm like, this is going to go south really hard. Um, and finally, the guy just won't shut up about it. Well, I end up just grabbing him by the shoulders and spinning him around and start choking him because I was like, he's going to hit one of us before it's like it was obvious he was going to do something. So I'm choking him, and I start seeing his friends. They notice and they start coming our way. Well, I let go of him, and the old Vietnam vet that I'm with just starts laying the boots to him. I'm like, oh shit. So like three other guys come over, and I'm really honest when I tell this story. The karate gods smiled upon me. Those three guys should have jumped on me and beat my ass, is what they should have done. But instead, they got in a line like a Bruce Lee movie and fought me one at a time. And it's like I just whacked all three of them. But I was thinking to myself, you guys should have just beat the piss out of me, and you didn't. You got in a line, and like one of them tried to kick me, and it was like, oh great. And I picked one guy up and just dumped him on his head, and it was almost comical. But then the owner of the bar comes out, and I'm like, man, thanks guy, man. And he was like, well, you started it, so we're calling the cops on you. And I was like, what? So we ended up going back to the rooms, and I think I talked with old Debbie Purcell back. She was there, and Tara LaRosa, and we ended up going back to Arkansas that night, just getting in the car and leaving and going home. But I was just like, what a what a shit show. It makes for a great story, you know, because I got to say, man, I beat up three guys, but it was really just poor tactics on their part.
Yeah, no, that's funny too. And another little historic show that you got to judge. I'm sorry when you said that. I sent the note. I know Keith Mills. I don't know if you know the photographer. He's writing a
Yeah,
book on women's history, and he may want to interview you. So,
dude,
uh,
I've still got an old CD full of Keith's. Yeah, I remember Keith, you know, driving like an old hobo, driving around and taking everybody. It's like, man, if you didn't know Keith Mills, you didn't get your career documented, you know. So
yeah, he's done a good job pumping out the books with the photography stuff. He's doing a history of women's MMA specifically, with Revolution being a pretty historic show that you were a part of. So hopefully you get the call. I'm pretty sure you will. So let's go back here into the next fight is Danger Zone again. Now you're back. This is 2003, so now really, you've got some wins, big wins. You've got some losses, but you're still, say a known quantity, like a real, like things are beginning to develop, but still a tough guy. And you go and face Travis Fippen, a little wrestler out of Kansas, who, I give a shout out to. We both have in common that me and him were both at one point Citibank employees.
okay,
So he's a guy I like. The key to my heart. He's a friend.
Travis was a good guy. It was we had a really funny fight, to be honest with you. First off, that venue out there in Minot, North Dakota was, I mean, first off, you fly into Minot and then you get in this shuttle and they put, first off, me and Travis were on the same plane. Now we're on the same shuttle, which is like literally a little short bus. And, I'm just not one of those guys, but I don't want to talk to a guy I'm fixing to fight. So, it was quiet the whole way. And it seems like you're driving out into the vast middle of nowhere. So we get to this casino and it's fight night. Well, first off, they're using one of Monty's old Extreme Challenge cages, which no way in hell is going to pass inspection nowadays. I mean, the plastic was all coming off. It was like a cheese grater. So that will come up again later. But I'm defending my little belt that I won in that tournament, and I think I'm the co-main event that night. I think Tony Franklin, who was kind of big at the time, he was fighting somebody. That was the main event. And Rowley was fighting Jason Ireland earlier in the card. So it's getting about time. They've got an intermission before, I'm coming out as the co-main event. Well, these people get into a fight outside. So when Travis and I fought, there was only like 50 people in there because when these people got into a fight outside, they closed the doors and wouldn't let anybody back in.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, so we go from this packed house to very intimate quarters. And it's going to come back because we're talking most of the fight. Me and Rowley are talking. Rowley and Travis are talking. And so, of course, Travis is an amazing wrestler. And so what I thought when I went out there was, I'm going to box his ears up. And I've got a good sprawl. He's not going to take me down. I'm going to stand up and beat his ass is what was going on in my mind. So the fight starts and he shoots on me. And I'm like, that's it. That's this badass wrestler shot that I've been dreading. So I sprawl and I'm like, fixing to whip his ass. Well, he comes up and does this lateral and throws me, I mean, like feet over my head. And I remember thinking to myself, oh shit, man, there's levels to this stuff, And as I'm going over, Travis is about to get good position, and I ended up grabbing the fence and just pulling myself back on top. And the ref told me don't grab the fence, and I was like, won't do it again.
Yeah.
So here is where Travis messed up that night. He had been learning jujitsu, and he wasn't wrestling. He was trying to play jujitsu, and he got comfortable on his back rather than wrestling up. And I know, because that's where we were back then, is you'd get to learning something and you'd get very single-minded. These guys today, they know everything, so you don't run into those little lapses. Well, I was picking Travis up because I felt how nasty the fence was. So I would pick him up. He'd keep his guard closed, and I just set his back on the fence and just drop him. And I mean, it was ripping his back up like the Passion of the Christ.
Oh man!
And so I've got him over there in it was a square cage, So I've got him over there in the corner where Rolly is, and me and Rolly are talking. And at one point, I'm talking to Rolly like, yeah, you want me to see me whoop him? And just talk shit. And Travis just hauls off and punches me and takes a chunk out of my nose. And then he starts talking shit to Rolly. And we're all laughing at each other. And it was weird, but it was so surreal because we were really fighting and trying to hurt each other, but we're clowning each other. And he's telling Rolly to shut up. And Rolly's talking trash to him. And man, there's a guy on the underground forum that I don't know if I can ever find this picture again. He posted a picture one time, just an old school camera shot, that I'm talking to his wife during the fight because there's like nobody there. Mm-hmm. And his wife was rooting for Travis and he was rooting for me. So I was yelling at her, talking shit to her. And he's got this picture where I've like got my finger pointing at her and I'm yelling. It was like, man, I wish I could get my hands on that picture.
That's hilarious because do you have that on video somewhere? Have you seen the video on it?
Man,
because the video, I bet you the video's got some of that audio. Because back in those days, they'd have to mic. Nobody had clean production. You pick up a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've got, I think, some old VHS-C of some of that stuff.
Nice.
And then, and I'll give Travis his due. He had a really good guillotine, and man, I beat it. I obviously over the normal time limit, I beat Travis. I just did. Well, then we had to go to an overtime. Didn't matter who won, like who was winning. You had to go to an overtime. So we go to this overtime, and Travis catches me in that guillotine. And I was like, oh, shit. It's like, no. And he's squeezing, and I'm like, okay, this is legit. And then my neck starts popping, and it popped once, and it popped twice. And I was like, man, if I don't do something, he's going to pull my head off. And I remember one of my training partners telling me one time, man, if somebody ever catches me in the guillotine, I just pop their fingers off. They let go. So I reached in there and grabbed Travis's fingers and just started yanking until he let go. And I was like, whew, thank God. So, yeah, that was may have been cheating, but I didn't want to lose.
No, for sure. And like my hat's off to Travis. This is, again, he's one of those guys that every time he showed up, put up a good fight and stuff. And that talking stuff, that'd be interesting to dig up the tape and see if you can hear it. In the old Hook and Shoot tapes, there's a great exchange. I remember hearing you had to put on headphones, right? But with the headphones, I could hear. This is a historic match. It was Travis Fulton against Brad Kohler. They fought for like 55 minutes. And when they finally got the first takedown, Kohler's in side control. And you could hear Kohler's corner try to tell him to relax and stuff. And, they want to tell him, hey, you got, and he goes, how much time is left? And you could hear Jeff with his monotone voice go, there's no time limit. And so he just turns around and goes, all right, Brad, you got plenty of time. He literally, it sounds comical, like, scripted, but that really what was going on and stuff. And yours, it just sounds like you guys had that thing going. Like, what's the name? Kevin Holland that talks in the UFC nowadays?
Yep. Yeah, man, I was really that's there were certain things that I was not very good at, but one thing that I was good at is, man, I was present when I was fighting. I was present. I There was something about the crowd, like I could hear the crowd. I generally engaged with people that were like on the first couple of rows, so it kind of kept me light. And I remember that fight that you were talking about with that I lost to Jonathan Border. My mom was on the front row of that fight,
Mm.
and when I was getting hit at one point, I was trying to talk to her like, I'm okay, everything's okay, and Jonathan's hit me in the face, and I was like, that's never happening again. You're getting in the cheap seats from here on out, because I can't try to console you while I'm fighting.
That's hilarious. That's unbelievable. But yeah, sometimes you're in such a zone, I can imagine, that if you notice it, then that's where you go. You know what I mean? Now it's part of the fight and you got to deal with it. So that's pretty interesting. Your mom, you wouldn't put her in the front row anymore. That's a pretty uh, good result from a fight. At least you know yourself. Now, we're coming in here a little bit more towards the end. We're getting into September 2003. You go back to Florida, and now you get a Brazilian guy with a lot of fights, Paulo Dantas. Again, a decision. What do you remember about this fight?
Yeah, I remember looking at his record. Like, he finished everybody at 135 and below. I mean, the guy could hit really hard. Um, I remember that it was a good fight. Um, he took me off guard because I was expecting him to just kind of stand up and want to do Muay Thai with me. Um, Not like I'm doing Muay Thai, but like that's what I expected him to do. And the first time we clinched up, man, he completely blew my mind, leg tripped me, and ended up on top. Um, and then rather than trying to get back up, he was willing to ground and pound on me. And it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting him to want to stand up and kickbox more, and that I was going to be able to kind of wrestle more. And it didn't go that way. Um, I ended up, and these AFC fights, if you remember, were 2 rounds, so they
Yeah.
were kind of interesting. Like how you would score them and stuff. Um, it was a good fight. I ended up getting on top of him, and man, just had a complete brain fart. I got on top, and man, I just, rather than trying to start getting to work, I just kind of was patting myself on the back, like, yeah, okay, well, now it's time. And it, I don't know where my brain went. And he reversed me, got back on top, and that was my chance to make something happen. And I blew it. And man, he was a tough guy, hit hard. Uh, I think I'm the only guy, south of 145 that he didn't finish in his
Mm-hmm.
career. Uh, you know, Tough guy, and
Yep.
I lost a decision, and shame on me.
Now that was 2003. Now you're coming towards the end of your career. You take all of 2004 off. You go back to Florida, and you actually get a redemption win. Rafael Rebello, I think he lists is American, maybe has a little bit Brazilian in there, maybe a little revenge. At least going back to the show and getting your win. How'd that feel?
Man, it felt good. It was nice to, when I took time off like that, man, as well as anybody, this isn't the same kind of scene. I didn't take a year off because I wanted a year off. I couldn't get any fights,
Mm.
and you put yourself out there, and people either call or they don't. And so I just couldn't get active. When they called me back to fight Raphael, I was excited, especially hearing, he's a Brazilian wrestling and jiu-jitsu champion. I was like, yeah, shit, sign me up. Um, it was a close fight. I got a decision. I felt like at the time I was like, man, why was this decision so close? And then I saw the video and I was like, well, yeah, shit, it was really close. But I felt like, it was one of those things where I could feel a little bit more oomph on my punches uh, during that fight. And so what I was feeling let me feel like, man, I'm really in control. But that's not how it looked. So yeah, when I saw the video, I was like, oh shit, I don't even know if I won that fight, but I did. It was a good decision. So, but I broke my hand in that fight, and that kind of had a little bit to do with some of the weird punch. I was, trying to come up with a better angle to
Mhm.
continue to punch, and just. But yeah, it was good. It was a really good win, and he's a quality guy. He went on to have a good career in the WC. So
Yep,
that
yep.
was good.
And now you got another win under against Antonio Smith on Ring Sport. And that seems like you retired. You mentioned at some point that you made a comeback come circa 2009, 2010. What motivated you to come back? What tell me the story there towards the end.
So the fight with Antonio was, the local thing when I was still working at the Taekwondo school, and things were starting to get pretty. I was getting ready to open up, go do my own thing, and some things happened that kind of sped that process up. So right after that Antonio Smith fight, I opened up Westside MMA and with Rowley, and I had made my peace with I'm just going to coach people now and I'm going to retire. And my thought process was on at that time, there is nothing in the UFC. I fought Shudo. I've won this danger zone title. I know who I am. I know that on my best night, I could beat anybody. On my worst night, I'm a turd. But I knew what I was about in the fight game. So I didn't feel like I had anything left to prove. Well, a couple of years go by, and I'm like, man, I've still got the itch. I want to fight again. So I picked up a fight down in Louisiana in Shreveport, and the guy that I fought, he's a tough guy. I came out. It was funny because I felt like, man, all the things in my head that I know, my body still works. This can be the best version of me. And man, I came out. I did some things that I exactly wanted to do. And then, man, he caught me right on the chin with the jab and
Mm.
just laid me flat down. And I mean, like the first 20, 30 seconds of that round, I felt like, man, this is me. I've got this together. And dude, he hit me and dropped me like a light. Well, now my thought is, okay, I'm good, but am I an old man and my chin shot? Or it was that luck? And I'm trying to play through that as I'm keeping myself, uh, safe. Well, we end up
During the
getting,
fight.
yeah, during the fight, because that's what I'm
Mhm.
thinking. I was like, man, have I just been lying to myself that this is the best me? Or am I really an old man at this point? Well, I'm on the bottom getting my shit together, and I get back up. Well, in my mind, like, yeah, I'll throw a kick. I see on the video later, my legs are so shot. I'm throwing these kicks like a cripple kid. They're awful. They're awful. And we exchange a little bit. He hits me on the chin and down I go again. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm shot. I don't have it anymore. I've got to try and get this guy out of here quick. Well, the bell rings and I go back to the corner and I'm like, I got this. I got this. And I just run out there the second round, do my go-to takedown, take him down, elbow him, take his back, choke him out. It's over. It's done. And I get done. I talk, and I'm like, man, I got it out of my system. You know, I obviously have lost my chin. You know, well, I talked to another guy that had fought this guy. He's like, oh no, man, this dude knocked me down, man. He hits hard as hell. You know, I'm like, okay, well, maybe it was just a luck shot. So I got to feeling a little bit better and was like, you know, oh well, hell, maybe I'll do it again. And so I went on, and then I don't know how much longer after that I fought again. That was my last fight, and it was a weird thing because it was going to be at 125 because so the UFC at this point in the timeline, the UFC opens up the lighter weight divisions.
Yep.
And at this time I'm like 38 years old. So I email Sean Shelby, and he sends me an email back, which I wasn't really expecting. He was like, hey man, I remember you from back in the day. Put a couple of wins in a row together and give me a call. So what's going through my mind is, and this is honestly what I thought at 38, I'm watching the guys that are fighting in the UFC. I'm like, man, I can't win consistently on this level anymore, but I want to fight in the UFC. I want to get in there and say I fought.
Yeah.
So I took a fight on a show over in the casinos at Memphis. I thought this fight was going to be 3 rounds. When we get there, it's 5 rounds. At the end of the fight, the announcers on the DVD, one had me winning 5 rounds to none. One had me winning 4 rounds to 1. It sounds about right to me. I mean, I was raising my hand up. Man, when they read the decision, I lost a decision. And it really hurt. And, you know, it was one of those things where if I won that fight, maybe I would have got my shot at the UFC.
Yeah, you would have been 4-0. You would have been 4-0. You know, 4-0 in your last 4 fights. You would have had a 4-fight winning streak, which at times had been enough. So,
yeah. And so it hurt. And man, I went back to my hotel room. Man, I cried all night, and just like, man, I don't ever want to do this again. I'm done. And so that was 38. 2 years later, I kind of got that itch, like I want to fight when I'm 40 just to say that I did it. And I started training for a fight. And man, I was just getting it was like I was a step slow with the people that I was training with. Well, in hindsight, I look back, well, I was training with a young Bryce Mitchell, you know, who's coming. It's like it's one thing to go, hey man, you know, these young kids are just mauling on you and stuff, and you're not able to keep up with them. Well, then you realize, well, man, this is a guy that a few years down the road is about to be a top 10 featherweight in the UFC, you know? So maybe I had it still enough, but I went ahead and pulled out of that fight just, you know, about a month out. I was just like, man, I just don't think I've got it left. And so,
you know, that's really hard to do sometimes psychologically, you know, to really assess yourself and be like, yeah, it's not worth it anymore, you know, because a lot of guys carry that baggage, and, you know, don't carry it well. You seem to have turned around, gotten your business together, and you're still instructing, gotten your respect. Like you didn't spend 5 years drilling away in a bar, did you?
Oh goodness, no, goodness, no. I had a good career. It's like I try to tell people. I think if you answer all your questions, that's about all you can hope for in a career. And my mind, just like I said earlier, in my time, on my best night, I could beat anybody in the world. I firmly believe that. And man, when it wasn't my night, it was not my night.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I heard a boxer say one time, that's the difference is great fighters win when they have bad nights. And so I know I was not a great fighter, but I was a good fighter.
No, for
So
sure.
I did a lot without a lot. And man, I really have no regrets. I would have liked to have got one fight in at 40 just to say I did. I'm
Mm-hmm.
about to turn 50,
Yeah.
here in about a month. And hell, there's a part of me that wants to do a little 4-round boxing match at 50. And then I go spar and get about halfway through the second round. I'm like, yeah, no, no, no.
Yeah, no, and that's a recurring story with guys with that competitive nature. That never really goes away. Um,
Well,
the quote, go ahead.
I told, I had some of the guys, I did some sparring the other night and was looking and feeling pretty good. And some of the guys were like, why don't you do that boxing match like you talked about doing? I said, man, here's the honest to God's truth to that. I can't, at this age, I can't beat anybody that I'm proud of beating. I could win a 4-round boxing match, but the guy that I would have to do it against, I wouldn't be proud of.
Yeah, and that's the competitive part of it. It's like you weren't just logging fights or trying to. There's an aspect of like, yeah, we would take whatever fight we got and stuff, but there was real competition going on there, and the guys that took it seriously are the guys that rose to the top. It's interesting. There's an author, Robert Hunter, who said, the first time he went to London as an author, with the great writers from there that inspired him, he had cranked out. He wrote for the Grateful Dead, so he wrote songs. So he wrote 3 of their most historic songs of all time. And people are like, "Oh, how'd that feel?" He goes, "Yeah, those days will come again, just not for me." It's an interesting perspective on life, and you got to watch it with your guys.
That's exactly right. I've heard, and I don't know which old boxer said it, but it was talking about, just a career and stuff. And it was like, you've got to understand when it's your time. And then when it's somebody else's time, be happy for them. Because it is, man, it's easy to just get to where you're kind of a hater, and just like, oh man. And I do. I have parts of me that goes, oh man, some of these new guys with, when you're spending more time. I saw a funny meme. It said, when I can tell more about your fight record on Facebook than I can on SureDog, it's like there's a lot to be said for that. But at the same time, man, these guys now are just, dude, they've got access to so much material. It's like, you want to fight a guy that's got a leg lock, good leg lock game. You don't have to spend $800 on a plane ticket and $150 an hour to train with Go-Kart to figure out leg locks.
Mm-hmm.
You just YouTube, and it's like one of my friends and old training partners, we're all the time telling folks, it's like, if you haven't rewound, Gracie Intermediate and Henzo and Tony Kukoc and, Gracie in action, trying to figure this shit out, you just don't understand the struggle.
Yeah, you may have seen Gokor on the old Secrets of the Octagon tapes. Because Gokor was one of the guys from that instructional series the UFC released way back when. So definitely crazy stuff. we're getting over an hour and a half here, so I'm gonna let you go. But I think people, if you're with us still, this has been a treat, and I think you got a really good feel for, an old school guy that, there's no doubt he paid his dues in a world where, what were you paying dues for? Not much, little prize monies here and there and things like that. And so it really comes from the passion, the love of the sport. And I knew Matt was one of those guys. I'm sorry I didn't have the Abu Dhabi stuff, which is a major accolade. But I think we covered your career pretty fairly in terms of you had a lot of pretty high moments and a lot of really good uh, foils, opponents that helped you lift your level, I think.
Absolutely, man. I'm proud, man. I look back at my record, and I'm just a little over 500, but I can defend it by saying, man, I fought a lot of good guys, man. A lot of good
9-7, man. A lot of guys, especially when they can't battle depression and things like that, or maybe they go back to the well too often, they wind up with bent records. 9-7 is above 500 record, and right now in the UFC, if you've kept the 500 record at the highest level, you've done so. You've accomplished something. You managed that in a weight class first before anybody. I mean that group of guys is a group that is actually worth remembering and may not be. So we'll do what we can here, man.
I appreciate you. Make a fat old bald man feel good.
Well, thank you very much, man. Great catching up, and look for this in short order here. I'll have this up.
Hey, man, take care. Let me know when it is, man. I was tickled to death to get to go over all this old shit.
Cool. Thank you very much, man. Talk to you soon.
Take care, Miguel. Bye-bye.